Yes, I do. I have to check.
Hello. How are you? I'm Vincent. You are? Dave.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. Here, you can sign in. That'd be great if we were just saying we have you down as coming. You can sit back there. Sit over here. Here. Over here. And help yourself. We have pizza, cheese and crackers, coffee, soda, wine, and we'll get started in about 5 minutes. This is the home, so he came in this morning.
Yeah. Is he coming?
He said he might stop at 7 after he
Okay,
drops his
okay.
son off or something. Is the light okay?
Yeah.
Or do you want the light to be over here?
Nope, it's good. Nope.
For sure.
What happened? Oh no.
Okay. We'll wait. We'll get started when you get back. The roofing is getting delivered tomorrow at between 11 and 11:30.
I gotta text him. I can't text him now, but I have to text him and let him know.
Who's that?
Who does the roofing?
Buck? Oh, Walter.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He said he could do it, but he needs to know that the materials are.
Oh, okay. Here, you can use my phone. It's the only thing with this book. I just think sometimes people call last minute.
Oh, I can do it after. I'm just gonna remember.
Okay. Well, you can do it.
Said between 11 and 11:30.
That's what Rocket said. What?
Coffee? I think we're
All right. Okay. And you tell me when we're live. When we'll...
We can do it right now. Ready?
I am.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. If you don't know me already, my name is Vince Simonelli, and I'm president of Green Homes. A brief description of what we're doing here tonight. We've been holding this seminar for the last 6 years since Sandy. We started holding it just to help people in general with their rebuilding efforts, because the idea of raising homes was very new to the Shore area. And after Sandy, a lot of people didn't know how to proceed. A lot of people were taken advantage of by contractors who were either had a lack of knowledge or were dishonest. So we've been doing this for 6 years to try and help people. It is free. It is not a sales pitch. I try and tailor it to the different people in the room and what you need. There are a lot of people here tonight that are looking for a new home. Some people for additions, some people elevating their homes. So we'll touch on some basic things that apply to everyone. We also have, as one of our guest speakers tonight, Mr. Scott Ludwig. Scott's an architect here in Lacey. We've been working together for over 20 years. Scott's designed probably 75% of the 2,000 homes and additions that we've done. Our company's done 400 homes since Sandy, either elevation or demolition or renovation. And prior to that, we built about 1,600 new homes. Okay, so let's get started. First, I want to just talk about some basic points that apply to everybody. One of them is elevating your home and where you should go. If you're doing an addition and you're not raising your house, this doesn't apply to you, but if you are either expanding or knocking down your house or building a new home, we want to make sure that we're at least base flood +1. That's the law. The lowest flood insurance that you can get is base flood +3. That's 97% of the lowest flood insurance. If you are inland in Manchester, this doesn't necessarily apply to you. If you're anywhere along the shore in any town, whether it's Toms River, Brick, Point Pleasant, Lacey, Barnegat, all the way down to Little Egg, down into Atlantic County, you have to deal with elevation. And the new flood codes say that you have to be a minimum of 1 foot above your flood zone. So if you are in an AE6, that means that you have to be, your floor has to be at 7, minimum of 7. Each town, that's the state law. Each town can require you to build to a higher elevation. So if you're in some of the shore towns, in Manasquan, in Point Beach, and some of the other shore towns that we work in, they require base flood +2. Elevation, by the way, that number on your flood elevation certificate, that means height in vertical feet above mean tide at the ocean. That's all that means. So if you look on your flood elevation certificate on the front page, and it says the first number is your crawl space or your basement, the second number is your finished floor. If it says elevation 7, that just means that your floor is 7 vertical feet above the beach at the ocean. That's all that means. When we elevate homes and we say something like, we're raising your home 9 feet, that means we're actually moving your finished floor 8 or 9 feet up in the air. If you are elevating anyway, the reasons that we're elevating, one is to lower your flood insurance rates. The second one is to avoid flood risk. And the third one is to create some space downstairs for parking or what have you. You're allowed to do 3 things in a floodplain. One is park. So if you raise your house up and you have a 3-foot crawl space and you make it a 9-foot space or an 8.5-foot space, you can have a garage. You can park underneath your house. The second one is entry. You can put a stairway under your house now and get in from your garage. And the third is non-essential storage, which means anything that it doesn't matter if you lose in a storm or anything that the insurance companies are not going to pay for. Other than that, people use their lower levels that they build for many things. Other than those 3 things, they create spaces where they put their children, they create spaces where they have bars and recreation areas, and they put sliding glass doors on the back overlooking the water, and they put windows in there, and essentially you're adding another 1,000 or 1,200 square feet to your house. So that's something that you want to consider when you're elevating, as opposed to lifting your house up to the minimum. Sometimes the minimum might be 4 feet above grade, and sometimes if you go another 4 feet, now you have that whole other level. And it doesn't necessarily cost you that much additional money. So a word to the wise, when we're setting our elevations, we want to be at least base flood +3 if possible. And if you're close enough, we might want to consider adding that 3 or 4 extra feet so that you get that finished level underneath. Another item about foundations and elevation, if you are knocking down your house and we are building a new house for you, or someone's building a new house for you, the least expensive foundation system is pilings. The least expensive is timber pilings because it combines a footing, and the structure from the ground up to the house. So, if you are knocking your house down, or if we're building a new house, and you are okay with timber pilings as a footing, it costs very little to go that extra 4 or 5 feet and create the lower level. If you are building on masonry, it costs significantly more to build an 8-foot basement versus a 4-foot basement. So these are things to consider. When you build on pilings, you do not have to finish the downstairs space immediately. You don't have to enclose it. You don't have to put concrete there immediately. You don't have to do any of those things. You do have to, if you have more than 5 feet under your house, you do need a double layer 5/8 inch sheetrock so you get a 1 hour fire rate. Anytime if you have an enclosure and you have an opening that's greater than 3 feet in diameter, meaning anything that's more than a regular door or a sliding door, if there's a double door or if there's a garage door, you need double 5/8 sheetrock downstairs. That being said, it is an improvement that you can do later. Once the house is up in the air and the stairs are built, you live there. If the budget doesn't allow it to be finished immediately, to be enclosed immediately, to have garage doors immediately, to have concrete immediately, none of those things are necessary. So you can kind of tailor your budget to meet your needs, and you can do it a year later or 2 years later or whenever you want. Scott will touch a little bit more on elevation and different codes and whatnot. One of the other things that we do at Dream Homes is we've been building since '93. We pulled together a professional team, and we work through whatever the situation is that you have for your particular lot. Everybody's lot is different. Everybody's house is different. Everything requires a little bit different adjustments as we go through. We also like to stress to people that when you are building, it's not an easy thing, whether it's a new house or demolition or an elevation. You are going to have issues as you build. And it's not, will you have issues? It's how will the people that you remain deal with them. So one of the things we're most proud of is in 25 years, we've never started a project and not finished it. Since Sandy, we've actually done 45 what we call rescue jobs, where other contractors had abandoned the home and we went in and were able to finish it. So that's something that we want to definitely focus on. Usually we have an attorney who has been speaking with us for the last 5 or 6 years. She does a consumer protection segment, which is excellent. And there's a handout here you're welcome to take. But one of the things that she says, which is very important, is when you're considering retaining a builder, whether it's for an addition or a new home, whether it's a modular home or a stick-built home, make sure your builder is licensed and has the correct license. General contracting and additions is a separate license, and your home construction is a separate license. Make sure that you check with your town to see if your builder has built there and whether there have been any issues. They won't tell you who to choose as a builder, but they will tell you if there are problems in your town. Make sure that your builder is licensed. Make sure that your builder is licensed and the insurance, I'm sorry, I said license. Make sure your builder has insurance and it's valid insurance. And when they hand you a certificate, call the number on the certificate. Call them up and say, hi, I'm just checking for insurance to be valid. Very many small contractors and small builders will pay the initial premium, get the certificate, show you a certificate, and nobody calls. It's 2 minutes and it'll save you a lot of grief. Not to go through the whole consumer protection thing, but there are a number of things that I've written about for 6 years that I feel really strongly about. One of them is we don't pay money ahead of work being done. We don't give very large deposits to builders. As a company, we generally accept a 5% deposit. I've heard people giving builders $60,000 and $70,000 deposits on $100,000 projects. We don't need to do that. We don't need to be rushed into anything, and we don't need to pay for anything ahead of when you see it in place. So if you choose anyone other than us, when you get an invoice, if there's a foundation invoice, you drive out there to your job, you look at that foundation, you look at the sticker, make sure it passed, and then you pay for it. You don't pay money ahead, except in the one case of modular homes. That's the one instance where, when the modular home is delivered, you're making a payment. Other than that, you want to make sure that we pay for things after they are paid and put in place and inspected. If you can remember those 5 things that I just told you, it was worth the trip, and that's the best takeaway that I have for you. So we touched on elevation a little bit. We touched on some of the considerations for downstairs, the foundation and the frame. I'd like to just kick around for a few minutes the difference between modular and stick building. In the last 25 years, we've done about 1,700 stick-built homes and several hundred modular homes. Last year we bought a modular company. We have distributorships with 3 of the largest modular manufacturers for Ocean and Monmouth, Middlesex counties. Both modular and stick have their advantages. Time frame is similar. Modular can be a little bit quicker. Modular is better if you're in a tight situation where all the houses around you are built. It can be a much cleaner build. The costs are very similar until you get above 2,500 or 3,000 square feet, in which case modular can have some scale. You can have some savings for scale. So certainly both should be considered. We will come out, give you an estimate for whatever you'd like. If you have a house and you're considering either elevating it, renovating it, or building a new home, we will advise you what we think is best, regardless of what your choice is. Sometimes the best choice is to do nothing, because your flood insurance isn't going to change, and maybe you just want to do an addition for more space. Sometimes the best choice is to elevate your home, so you can save on flood insurance and maybe get some more space. Sometimes the choice is to knock it down and just start over again. Scott does a very good piece about choosing what to do, whether it's smarter to knock your home down or whether it's smarter to renovate it and rebuild it, and I'll let him run through that. And by the way, this is very informal. If you have a question, especially if you think it might pertain, raise your hand. You don't have to wait till the end. We're here at the end. We'll talk to you specifically if you'd like, but if you have anything, please share it with us. I mentioned that we bought Premier Modular Homes in Little Lake Harbor in October. The man retired after 30 years, and we had done a home next to one he was building when we got to meet him, and he checked out our company, and we wound up buying his company, so that was a good thing. All right, you know what? Scott, would you like to join us? Folks, this is Scott Lepley. He's going to come on up here and say a few words.
Vince.
You
Unplug that.
Yes. And there's another piece that just came out. Welcome to Couples House.
Anybody want to get pizza before I say anything?
Anybody want another piece of pizza? Just came out.
Otherwise Vince has to eat the whole thing.
Otherwise, we'll have an entire pie.
Okay, actually, I want to say a couple things first that dovetail into the items that Vincent has already mentioned. Talk about insurance. Make sure your contractor has insurance. Make sure your contractor is licensed and registered. Well, the same thing applies if you're ever going to design your house. Make sure your architect has insurance. Make sure your architect is licensed and registered. And that's really an important consideration. I've been in business now for about 43 years. I've designed 9,000 houses. Only my early ones fell down, so I'm doing pretty good now. I carry $3 million worth of liability insurance. It's not cheap, but it's definitely worthwhile, and you want to make sure that whoever you work with has it. One of the advantages of hiring a general contractor such as Vincent is that it's his responsibility to make sure that each and every one of the subcontractors carry their own insurance as well, so you're protected throughout the whole course of the construction of the house. So I'm not going to talk anything about that, but it is one of the reasons why you would prefer to hire a contractor than try to act as your own GC on a project. And I've done both. Back in the day, I was also a builder, registered, licensed, the whole bit. and I built quite a few houses, and I also built a couple houses for myself, and I know how complex and how difficult it can be. A lot of times when you act as your own GC, not only does it create a lot of aggravation, a lot of issues, but it doesn't always save you money, because you're gonna call a plumber up and he's gonna tell you, well, you know, I can do it, I'll get to it in a month and a half, and it's gonna cost you 30% more than what I charge a builder, because the builder's giving me 15, 20, 30 jobs a year, so he's gonna get a better price than you will as well. So make sure if you're gonna try to act as your own general contractor, that you address the insurance issues, that you look at the cost issues very closely and compare it to what a general contractor would charge you for the same project. You're gonna have a lot of decisions to make when you get into a project of building your own house. And as Vincent mentioned, one of the very first decisions you have to make is, do I try to salvage what I have? Do I elevate it? Do I build new and demolish what I've got? I used to joke that people called me up and said they wanted to raise their house and it was on a slab, but I would tell them to start a bulldozer on the left side of the house and drive it to the right side and then call me back. And kind of a strange story involves the house I looked at down in Tupperton a couple of months ago. The house had been on a slab. It was semi-destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. People who owned the house came in, lifted the house up. Of course, they had to build a whole new floor system because none existed. The slab is still underneath the house. It still has the peel and stick tiles stuck to the slab and it's all face of the house. But the house had been lifted up, they put new floor joists in, built a whole new floor deck, and then set the house down on the floor deck. So obviously they lost all the plumbing, they lost the cabinets, they lost any electrical work that went down, any hot water baseboard heat that went down in that slab, all gone, had to be completely replaced. In addition to that, after they raised the house, they kind of walked in and said, we got a pretty good view here, maybe we'll put a second floor on. Well, the house only had 2x3 walls. So they went around and they doubled all the studs in the entire house, removed all the sheetrock, then removed the roof, put new floor joists on top of it, and built a second floor on top. This all happened post-Hurricane Sandy. About a year ago, they decided to put the house up for sale. They sold it for exactly what the land value would be, minus the cost of demolishing the house. Because everybody who looked at it said, this is not what I want, this is a mess, this is a disaster. They had first floor, it still had 6-foot 10-inch ceilings. They had a house that did not take advantage of the way the property views were. They had a house that was strange in terms of how the second floor was attached to it. And it just felt very dark and closed in, so it was not the house that people want nowadays. But be careful, you're going to invest a lot of money when you build your house. Make sure that you're doing something that's not just for you, but also for Joe Public, who's going to be buying the house from you somewhere down the road. My wife is the one who says to me, this is our house, forget about what the next person wants. But I can't get that on my mind because I've been dealing with you and other customers for, like I said, 43 years, and I know what they want, and I know what makes sense, and I know what can be done out there, and I also see things that don't make sense, and as much as you try to talk people out of it, they don't always listen to you. I was kind of a victim of the same thing when I bought my parents' summer home from them on Long Beach Island in 1990 it was, roughly, so almost 30 years ago. And my father was not good at maintenance, and the termites were holding hands, and the house was still standing up. But it was not in good shape. And I bought that house, and because it was their summer bungalow, I had to take it all apart and put it all back together. I couldn't put it in a dumpster much as I wanted to because they would have had collective heart attacks. So I put the house back together, made it real nice, and about 15 years after we bought it, maybe even 10 years after we bought it, the foundation started to fail. The old cinder block foundation started to crack and come apart from the salt air down there on Long Beach Island. So at that time I decided to lift the house up, put garages underneath, tear down an old garage that was in the backyard so the kids would have a place to play, and build a small addition at the same time. At that time I spent $118,000 to do that, which was much less than it would be by today's standards. The case in point is that when I renovated the house 30 years ago, it only cost me about $40,000, which might have been $50,000 if I had built a brand new house back then. So the numbers are not much different from each other in terms of complete renovation versus new construction, point that Vincent made earlier. But either way, we lived in that house, we used it, we liked it, we were there for 28 years. 2 years ago, I finally decided to sell the house and build a house with an elevator because I don't like stairs anymore, I don't like going up and down stairs on crutches. And there's just certain things that happen to you when you get old that you don't want to deal with certain issues of owning a house. So I sold the house, and I probably sold it for about $5 more than the vacant lot after investing all that money over those years. And bought another house and tore that down and built a new house for ourselves. And it's great, it's nice to be in a new house. There's something to be said for walking around inside a house and saying, look at this, I got a nice high ceiling, nice big windows, efficient walls, new construction, good insulation, nice plumbing fixtures that don't use too much water. You can save money throughout the whole construction. I'm a solar guy, I put solar system on the house. I've got a solar system on my primary house here in Waretown as well. I've talked about that a few times in some of the other seminars here, and I'm always happy to answer questions about it. But the point is that when you make those decisions, make sure you factor in not just what you're doing right now, but where you want to be when you're all said and done. I've also had people who say to me, well, can I renovate my house even though it's below flood elevation? The answer to that question is yes, but you're very, very limited in terms of what you're allowed to spend. Typically, a town will allow you to spend up to 50% of the physical value of the house for a renovation or an addition on a house that's below flood elevation. Now, if you choose to go with an addition, the addition has to be raised above flood elevation, as Vincent mentioned, plus 1 foot, plus 2 feet, plus 3 feet. So it's not going to be at the same level as your existing floor is, but it can be done.
And it rarely makes sense.
Right, rarely makes sense.
Rarely.
And in addition to that, a secondary thing that can come back to bite you is 10 years later when you decide to do a new addition, they're going to say to you, no, sorry, you took your 50%, you're done. So at that point, you either elect to put the house in a dumpster and start over again, or you try to elevate the whole thing, which can really be a mess because now you're working with 2 different levels. So, as I said, it's going to be a lot of decision-making process, and a lot of careful thought needs to go into what you do before you even sign any kind of a contract with Vincent or any other builder, just to make sure that what you're doing is exactly what's going to benefit you in the long run. Now let's see, I had a few other notes here. Vincent mentioned whether or not you decide to elevate your house earlier. I had a client out in Forked River Beach, out on the end of Island View Drive, all the way out on the river. And they had one of the little Charlie Crow bungalows out there, which there are hundreds of them. And they came to me and they said, we want to put a big addition next to our house, but we don't want to lose the comfort and quaintness of this little bungalow. We want to keep it. So we did a 2-story addition next to the bungalow, tied them over with a roof over frame over the top of the bungalow. About 3 years after we did that, the floor slab of the bungalow collapsed and fell into a space where the ground receded underneath. And we had given them a price at the time, about $8,000 more to build that whole house brand new. Instead, they spent $40,000 just on repairing the floor of the bungalow because the cabinets had fallen into the cavity. The whole thing had just come apart. So again, make sure, and I can't emphasize this strong enough, make sure that what you're doing makes dollars and cents before you do it. Another thing Vincent mentioned too is putting the slab underneath the house. This is generally cheap, usable space. We've called it everything from storage to a garage to a surfer's hangout where the kids play ping pong, whatever the case might be, but that is valuable space underneath that house. Yes, it may get water in it at some point in time, but generally, actually not generally, the code requires that any materials you use down there are essentially waterproof, so you can just take a hose and spray that thing out if you ever get a little bit of mud and water down there after a storm. Now what that means is you're going to be using either cement board or pressure treated plywood on the outside of the house. If you use pressure treated plywood, you can put vinyl siding or vinyl shingles over it. On the inside, you're allowed to use closed cell foam insulation and nothing else as far as insulation goes. You can't use open cell foam because it soaks up water. You can't use fiberglass bats because they get ruined by water. Inside finish, you're allowed to use a couple different products that are similar to drywall. One is called AquaTuff, one is called Dragon Board. They both cost a little more than drywall, but look for all the world just like it once you spackle it and paint it and finish it. And of course, you're allowed to have a concrete slab down there. You're also allowed to put ceramic tile down on the first floor, again, impervious to water. You're not allowed to use carpet, not allowed to use hardwood. I've done a couple rooms that people want to use, such as an exercise room on the first floor. We put down the interlocking rubber tiles. They're permitted because, again, they're completely waterproof or water resistant. But FEMA actually gives you a whole list of materials you're allowed to use in that space below the flood elevation, as opposed to what you're allowed to use anywhere in the rest of the house. Now you do still have to flood vent that space because they act under the assumption that the water rises, it's going to come through there. And they don't want the water to build up on the outside of the house and not on the inside. They want the pressure to be able to equalize on the 2 sides of that skirt wall you're going to be building. So consequently, flood vents are put around the outside. They need to be installed on more than one side so that you get cross ventilation, and they need to be installed about one flood vent for every 200 to 250 square feet of enclosed space. So if you have typically maybe 1,000 square feet under the house, you're looking at 4 or 5 flood vents. And they're not cheap. They're about $200 a piece right now, I think $208, something like that.
Yep. And they're
But-
worth every penny, because
Yeah.
as the flood, when and if there is a flood event, there's foam inside this stainless steel door that rises, swivels on a pivot, and allows the water to go in and out of the foundation and not get trapped in the foundation and blow out the walls. That's the reason for flood vents, and they're one of the best improvements in the new codes.
And it also means that when you pay for flood insurance, you'll pay for flood insurance for this floor up here and not the one down there if it's non-vented. Those flood vents are what allow you not to have to insure the first floor of your house. Although again, keep in mind you will not have any coverage for any damage that occurs on that floor. So if you stick the old refrigerator down there and there's a flood, it's a goner and you're not gonna get $1 back for it. Another thing too, kind of on the same line, talking about finishing underneath your house, is Vincent mentioned that you can put a slab down there either now or in the future. Easy to do once the house is up on piling, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind. We have all different kinds of soils along the Jersey coast here. We have sand, we have gravel, but we also have peat and clay. Peat and clay are not stable materials. I've seen some houses out here, again, Forked River Beach, the area just south of Cedar Creek, off of Claremore, Mallard, Oxgoose, where there's been as much as 16 inches of settlement as the peat under the house compacts over the years, or as it leaches out through the bulkhead into the waterfront that's surrounding the house. So just remember that whatever you do under the house is to some extent a sacrificial finish if you decide to build it over that type of soils. We did a house on Mallard Drive off of Claremore where they actually had to piggyback 2 30-foot pilings to drive and hit bottom. They drove one piling in, then they stopped, they put a steel coupling on it, put another pile on top and kept going until they hit bottom, 60 feet down. So you can see that there's a good chance, not a good chance for most cases, but there's a chance that you're going to have such poor soils under the house, so you need to think about whether or not any settlement can occur. I've also had people who come to me and they say, well, I'm going to put a bunch of big spikes in my pilings and then pour the concrete slab around those spikes. Well, you know what? Those spikes are not going to support that slab if the ground underneath it subsides. They're going to the slab will just break and be angled up around your piling and you'll still have a broken slab all the way around. There's a lot of houses in this area where the garage slab is actually settled, because early on none of us knew enough to put concrete footings underneath the garage slab in areas of really bad soil. So the slab would go down even though the whole perimeter of the house was supported by the pilings. And you'll see that sometimes when you look at some of these houses, you drive into the garage and it's one of these situations. Vincent also touched on the fact that when he sets up his contracts, he tries to get them based on the amount of work being done being commensurate with what you pay for the house. My son is a builder up in Vermont. He's in close competition with Vincent.